So I want to give these guys all shout outs. But guess what, y'all? Today is Father's Day. So happy Father's Day to all the dads out there. And today I want to talk about quantum fatherhood because, again, we talk about quantum spirituality, and quantum literally means down to the most finite split of the hair, if you will, or seeing things at their most subatomic level. And the reason why I'm really into this whole thing about quantum spirituality is because I'm really obsessed with why. Why is the singular most important question to me. Why is how we get to everything else. When we understand why, when we understand the reason behind something, then we can better understand the thing. In other words, if you don't understand that a Phillips screwdriver, the why of the Phillips screwdriver is to turn Phillips head screws, which is to provide a better method of turning the screw, to apply more torque to the turning of the screw. If you don't understand the why of it, you won't understand the how, and you won't understand the what, and you won't understand anything. So we focus on the why because I believe that why is the most quantum thing. And so fatherhood, I'm excited to be a dad. And I'm excited about being able to share what fatherhood means to me with you. Because I really believe that in the whole complex universe of humanity, that fatherhood is probably one of the most misunderstood concepts. And it's not only misunderstood, but it is grossly misapplied. Because one thing is that you have one group of people who believe that fatherhood is not important. In other words, that you can simply raise children with simply a mother and everything will be okay. And that is one extreme of the spectrum. The other extreme of the spectrum is that fatherhood is the primary thing. And that stems from the concept that God is a dude. Okay. And of course, there are people that are going to say, well, of course, God is a dude, Derek. What the hell are you talking about? God is Father. Well, if you believe in biblical inerrancy and you believe in biblical infallibility, then yes, that's absolutely true. However, I personally don't start from that premise. The Bible is not a flawless, inerrant document. We have to stop with that. The Bible is full of allegory and is full of uh, shadowing and types and all of this other stuff, but it's not the last word. And the proof of that is that there are multiple versions of it. How can there be multiple versions of the same last word? That just doesn't make sense. So when we talk about fatherhood, I don't want to underemphasize fatherhood as you do on one end of the spectrum, and I don't want to overemphasize it because I'm going to tell you something. I was raised by a single parent, and my mom did a phenomenal job of raising us. All things considered, she did a superb, a fantastic job. But there are things that have shown up in the adult manifestations of me and my siblings where the absence of fatherhood, it shows up. And likewise, I know people who are raising children as single dads, and the children are lacking in the motherhood department because the fatherhood is overemphasized. Now watch this. I'm not saying that. I'm not talking about nuclear families, and also for my LGBTQ family. Listen, I'm not talking about, like, the whole biblical concept of family. What I'm talking about really here is two parents. because children need balance. They need a yin and a yang. They need a positive and a negative. And when I say positive and negative, I'm not talking about in terms of ideology, ideology or anything like that. What I'm saying is that basically there has to be a balance of nature, a balance of manifestation. And that's where fatherhood and motherhood kind of coincide. And so when you're talking about fatherhood and motherhood, even in same-sex parentage models, basically you still have the same thing. You have the father, and you have the mother, and even if you're saying that basically it's not like, even if you're saying it's same sex, there's roles, different roles. And so I want to talk about that. I hope I cleared that up. And if I didn't, if for any reason you think that I may have screwed that up, please let me know, because I want to make it right. Because my thing is that um, the other thing is that I think we've kind of made too much of the whole traditional model. So with that being said, what fathers do, fathers create this mechanical, logical, methodological aspect of parenting. The mother or motherhood is the nurturing, caring, emotional aspect of the human input. So when we talk about fathers and the fatherhood model, fathers bring in things like, how can I say it, neuromechanical things like sports, or how to handle tools, or and again, mothers can do this too. But what I'm saying is this is basically the role of fatherhood. And what I really want to get to here is like the fascination aspect of it. I can't tell you. I've said this. I said this in my podcast today, and I've said this in numerous occasions, that I really am absolutely fascinated with my kids. I'm absolutely blown away with who they are, with what they've become, and how they're being shaped, and how they're growing, and all of these things. I mean, I'm fascinated with the cadence of their speech. I'm fascinated with the timbre of their speech. I'm fascinated with how they walk, and how they carry themselves. I'm fascinated with how they express themselves in social situations. I'm really fascinated. And this is um, part of what I think is the fatherhood model. I think that the father role should be a model of fascination, because this is the way guys work, or people who think along these lines, or who think in this paradigm. When you're fascinated by technology, when you're fascinated by a car, when you're fascinated by a computer, or you're fascinated by astronomy, astrology, when you're fascinated with something that is, how can I say this, based on components, I think that the motherhood aspect really focuses in on the whole. And fatherhood focuses on the components. So I'm focusing in on all of these different components, the piece parts of what make up the whole, whereas the motherhood focuses more on the whole. And, and what I'm saying is that in the quantum sense, uh, exercising the fatherhood role means viewing things at a more componentized level. And so when I look at things like how my kids speak, uh, my fascination with that leads me to two things. It leads me, number one, to observe what they do, and two, to provide my input. Now, when we talk about things at the quantum level, is that the mere act of observing influences. So by observing, and our fascination with our observation also provides input to either change, adjust, modify, or even complete that which we're looking at. Because in quantum physics, when you're observing a quantum particle, the mere fact that you are observing it, you're changing its state. And that's what fatherhood does. So when I'm fascinated with my kids, but I'm also influencing them through my observation. And humanity is funny like that, because if you ever notice this, that people are different under observation. In other words, how you're observing them influences how they operate. And people will say, "Oh, well, Derek, no, that's not true. Everybody, people are either real or they fake, and they uh, operate the same way in person as they do online, and so on and so forth." And to a large degree, there's some truth to that. But it's like, if you're observing me in a professional capacity, if you are observing me in my secular space or my professional space, there is a certain way that I comport myself. Now, I like to think that it's the same as how I comport myself in other areas, but it really isn't. And my boss observing me is different than a colleague, or or how an outsider or a customer may be observing me. It's different. And that observation also shapes my manifestation. And that's what fatherhood does. I hope that's making sense. I'm kind of this is funny, because it's actually, I've really thought about it, but I've never really talked it out. So basically, what you guys are getting is something that's just kind of fresh out of my mind. Um, when I know, like, when I was growing up, my dad wasn't around, but my dad and I are close today. And so when I'll catch my dad looking at me, and when he looks at me, he's like, wow, I'm really proud of this guy, you know. And so, even if, like, let's say if I'm in a down situation where I'm not feeling my best, or I'm not feeling so good about myself, if I'm around my dad and I catch that observation, it influences how I'm acting. So what happens is that, because I observe the pride of my dad in observing me, then that changes my attitude. And so this also has to do with, how are we observing? Because if you're a dad or a father and you are observing critically, in other words, you are making judgments about your child, then that is going to influence their behavior. But if your observation is one of fascination, if it is one of just, wow, amazing, you're amazed, you're flabbergasted by this, if you're looking at them as though they are just the most wonderful thing in the world, what happens is that when they catch you observing them from that perspective, it elevates their consciousness, it elevates their emotions, and what happens is they have a level of confidence that goes higher. Here's a funny thing, a bit of transparency about my childhood, is that I was not a confident child. basically it was like I didn't have this fatherhood pouring into me. I had father figures, but my father figures also had children of their own, and they had to give that to their kids. They couldn't give it all. They couldn't give it to me in the same way they gave it to their own children, and that's okay. I get that. So I had issues, and I had to develop some things internally, some coping mechanisms, some strategies for basically elevating my own self-esteem and thinking of myself higher. And I had to really do this so that I could become a functioning member of society, so that I would not be dysfunctional. But my sons, they operate under a completely different paradigm. They don't lack confidence, I don't think, in anything. They believe, literally, they believe that there is nothing they can't do. And that is what I have tried to convey to them. That in my observation being one of positivity, my observation being one of fascination, my observation being one of amazement and pride, that I've given my son something that I didn't have as a child. And that is really, really cool. I mean, when you think about it, when you observe, and this is hard, but this will change your relationships with people. That when people know that you are not applying a critical lens in your observation of them, people are more accepting of your presence, and they're more accepting of your observation. But if you are looking through a critical lens, if your lens is critical, if it's condescending, people they'll reject your observation, or they won't be happy or comfortable when you're around. And listen, I'm not saying that I've got it perfect. There are times when I observe things critically. Everybody does. But especially in dealing with your offspring, your children, the lens has to be different. And I hope that in seeing this, if you are a father or you are a father figure, or if you are in the father role, that when you are observing your offspring, remember that your observation also influences outcomes. So when you are observing, observe from a standpoint of fascination. I mean, just be awestruck. Because here's the thing. As a father, you are given stewardship over another human being's life. You are given responsibility to pass on things to your offspring that will influence the world in perpetuity. Because, see, when you influence your offspring will influence their offspring. And it will be largely because of what you've given them. Either I'm doing this because my dad did it and it seemed right to me, or I'm doing this because my dad did it a different way and I think my idea or my way is better. I share another thing with you too, that there is a lot of talk now going around about corporal punishment, that is spanking your kids. And my dad, when I was around him, my dad gave out physical discipline. My uncles gave out physical discipline. My grandfather gave out physical discipline. And so when I became a father, when I became a parent, I physically disciplined my kids because I thought that this was the thing that I needed to do to keep them out of trouble because hey, it worked for me. But then when I really began to critically analyze it, in other words, now I'm applying the critical filter to myself, I realized that the spanking didn't help me, it actually hurt me. And that I was passing on the hurt. I was paying the hurt forward. And at some point I began to understand what love really is, and I had some conversations with Source, with Papa, with Mama, that I was never chastised in a physical sense by my creator, by my ultimate parent. That Source has always dealt with me gently, has always nudged me, has never forced me, has never berated me, has never been condescending to me, has never shouted me down or anything. All these things that I did to my kids because it was done to me. And I thought, hey, if it worked for me, it'll work for them. But then I said, when I began to put the critical lens on and look at myself, I said, no, this really didn't work for me. This actually hurt me. And this really influenced me in a negative way. And so now, as a result, my sons have not had any physical discipline in about 7 years. And I'm really happy about that because basically they are learning that you don't have to have a physical reaction to stimuli. That you don't have to go into ass kicking mode, because that's really what it is when you get right down to it. So when I observe my kids, I'm observing them from a standpoint of pride. I'm observing them from a, and let me say this too, because this is going to shock some people, but it's going to bless many more. And it's this, that I worship my kids and they worship me. Now, when I talk about worship, see, people are who have been indoctrinated by church, they're going to say, oh, that's blasphemy, that's heresy. No, it's not, because basically worship is love, respect, and honor. Love, respect, and honor. That's all it is. And so when my children look at me, they love, they respect, and they honor me, but I also love, respect, and honor them. And as a result, they go out into the world, when they go out into the world, knowing, not having to think, not having to guess, not having to wonder if, they know that they are loved, honored, and respected. And so they will not interface with people who do not love, honor, and respect them. I remember we had an incident with my youngest son that he felt that he was doing all the right things. And I'm going to tell you something. Next to Kyle Butler, my son, or next to my son Anthony, Kyle Butler's the nicest person I know. And so these two people are just nice by nature. It's like the niceness just oozes from them, right? And so my son Anthony, he was like, hey, everything that I've done, he said, I'm not changing myself. I'm just being who I am. But being who I am has always been a positive experience for everybody who comes into contact with me. And he told us something, and I'll never forget this, that he said, my teacher does not see me. You catch that? That she did not see him. And he wasn't talking about with physical eyes. That wasn't it. He was talking about spiritually. Because he was seeing, at 6, 7 years old, he was seeing spiritually. And he could see that he was not being loved, honored, and respected. And he couldn't get his mind wrapped around that. And so what we had to do is we had to go back and tell our kids, okay, listen, we love, honor, and respect you. That's the way we do things, and we expect to be loved, honored, and respected. That's the way we are operating. But not everyone is going to do that. But that should not change your operational mode. That you must love, honor, and respect everyone, irrespective of how they do you. So I'm not going to talk long because it's Father's Day, and I want to go and I'm going to go and stick my feet in the pool and drink some scotch or something, and I'm just going to enjoy the day. I'm going to really kick back, not work or anything like that. Um, what I want you to do, if I could share something with you, is to practice worshiping humanity, to extend love, honor, and respect to every human being that you encounter. And what will happen as the result of that is that people will actually look forward to your presence. They will look forward to the time that they spend with you, and they'll look forward to what or how your observation influences them. So, love, honor, and respect your children. Remember to be fascinated, to be amazed. Remember to look at things at a componentized level as the parts that, and don't get me wrong, that guys or the father figure, that we can see things as the whole too, but that's not our role. Our role is to see things from the parts that make things up. You know, the role of the mother sees the whole and nurtures that and builds that. And I don't want to leave the impression that either is over or underemphasized. Because what I want you to take away from this is that, yes, fathers are important. Yes, fatherhood is important. But no, is fatherhood more important than motherhood? It isn't. It isn't. But it's that yin and yang. It's that positive and negative, not from the ideological standpoint, but from a quantum standpoint, that all of that is required in order to produce the right outcomes. Okay? So I hope all of that is encouraging, that it's blessing. And I want to say to every father and father figure out there, happy Father's Day. I hope that you enjoy this to the absolute fullest. And I hope that you spend the day in utter, absolute fascination of your kids. And if you want to contact me, you can go to my website, derekday.com, and you click the link called Contact. And it'll give you a form to fill out in which you can add something to there, and it'll send me an email. And if I get the email, whether it's positive, negative, whether it's good, bad, whether you love me, hate me, whether you think I'm awesome or you think I'm a motherfucker, I will respond to you. And you can also hit me up on Facebook at Derek Day Multimedia. Also, you can hit me up on Instagram or Twitter. My handle is Derek E. Day. That's DERRICKEDAY. Or check out my videos on YouTube. Hundreds and hundreds of videos that really track my whole spiritual evolution, at least over the last 10 years. And then check out my blog on Pathos. It's called Love Minus Religion. And there is a new episode of the Love Forward podcast. It is on now. It is for Father's Day, and it will absolutely bless you. And there will be another podcast episode coming up this week. So make sure you like and subscribe to the Love Forward podcast. I would greatly appreciate that. So until the next time, namaste. I see the God in you. I see the light in you. Peace and love.